My name is Maarten Afman. I work at CE Delft. We are a small independent environmental policy research and consultancy organization based in Delft in the Netherlands. We were given an opportunity to do a research that we have titled Cheap Power by Smart Charging of EVs. And of course, if you look at the smiling picture of the lady and the man, that's what it's about, using locally produced, that's an ideal picture, locally produced renewable energy to power your car. That's the attractive picture. Now, many people were writing about this and putting it into government memos. But how big is now this cost advantage if you could quantify this? That is a topic that was interesting for us to know, and the Dutch government also, RVO, wanted to know this. So we were given the opportunity to investigate this. These are our research questions. We call them synergy advantages. What kinds of synergy advantages are there? Where are they located? And how could you quantify them? And then looking at power generation effects and grid cost effects. So those two topics we investigated. And then, of course, the effects of smart charging and vehicle-to-grid. So I'll get you through the results in a very, I have a couple of minutes to present it. It's a report, you can download it online if you really want to know the details. Well, of course, some developments, wind and solar. Wind is quite certain with the energy agreement. Solar is not yet so certain. You don't know what is going to happen with that precisely, but ECN estimates that in 2030, under fixed and intended policy, we are at almost 50% share of wind and solar in our electricity mix. That means, and it's well known, I think, in this group, more fluctuations in the supply of power to the power system, where usually demand was fluctuating and supply was following demand. So that's a new thing. Solar is on top in the right part of the screen, and wind is on the right at the bottom. And solar has this typical, if you average over a year, you see this kind of hill-shaped production pattern. Well, EVs, what we know is that in the Netherlands, the share of EVs, plug-in hybrids and full electric, is growing fast. Government policy is very important, of course, for that. And what you see is that people charge, for a large part, some study for a couple of years ago, during, for example, the evening peak. And if you do power price simulations for future energy scenarios, bottom right, if you look at average prices, people start at the moment where it's the most expensive hours. So that is not smart. Now, what kind of synergy advantages between renewable energy and smart, coupling that to smart charging of EVs? I already told electricity production, less absorbing fluctuations in the demand by steering demand. Another one is preventing curtailment of wind energy at some point where wind energy production might be larger than what steerable power production can absorb. Then you need something, and then the ultimate is to have the wind power being curtailed. In the Netherlands, we have, in this part of Europe, currently we have an excess of production capacity for power production. But at one point in time, this will no longer be the case. If older facilities close or have to close, then we have to generate, if you go to 50% share of wind and solar in the electricity mix, you need new power plants that can accommodate the hours where there is no wind, no solar production. So at some point, smarter charging can also perhaps prevent some new investments in that area. And then there are short-term balancing market advantages that we did not quantify. Furthermore, you have the energy infrastructure, the grid, and you can perhaps also contribute to less grid investments in that area. And we also believe, and we tried to investigate that in the study, I did not quantify it, a sort of mutual reinforcement in market uptake of either electric vehicles or solar PV, because if you have one of the other, you might be stimulated in also going for, purchasing solar panels or an electric vehicle. That's the smiley picture I was presenting. So if you want to quantify how, then how, if you look at the futures, so we have to design some scenarios for that, looking at like the certain developments and looking until 2025, that was the year we took in our study, from what can happen, so the likely and plausible developments, perhaps being a bit more, and also some less certain developments. But the real breakthrough technology developments we did not put in the study. In our scenarios, what we varied were the level of especially solar installed capacity, the number of electric vehicles, which is of course very much dependent on price developments in that area, and policy, of course. We also varied the average range of an electric vehicle due to developments in mainly battery technology and the amount of batteries in electric vehicles, partly related to the cost of storage, of course. And we varied smart charging. So we had regular charging, smart charging steered on solar and renewable in feed, and then also added with vehicle to grid, so in feed from the battery. Scenarios, complex picture I will not explain, but we have 6 scenarios and then some reference scenarios that are needed to be able to compare the differences with. Some details. Our many EV scenarios is 1 million EVs, split in half between plug-in hybrids and full electric vehicles. And our limited EV scenario is 200,000 EVs, with the majority being plug-in hybrids, so having a little bit less range. And in battery capacity terms, our trend projection was a factor of 1.7 more range on average than the electric vehicle of today. So as a fleet average, that's the figures we calculate with. And then the extra large range, we put in a factor of 3.2, but that's only one scenario. So some details there. We have used 2 simulation tools. From the scenarios, we put in a sort of scenario, a grid model, CE grid we call that, which gives an hourly flow of electricity in a grid. We simulate then the entire Netherlands. And that has the steering algorithms for smart charging or vehicle-to-grid algorithms, which was developed by us for this model, not so very complicated or advanced. And you can see the effects on the peak power that goes to the grid, and you can look at the grid investments from that with an average grid cost figure. And then the output of that model is fed into the electricity market simulation model that has an hourly spot market price. We simulate a day-ahead price in that model. It has from individual power plants and fossil fuel costs and so on for future years. It will give you the average power price, but also the yearly average cost of all of the electricity produced, simulated in the model, and the effect the different EVs have on that, and the different smart charging chargers. Example of simulation outputs of CE Grid. One scenario in the summer. You see at the top of the figure in the yellow line, that's the solar in-feed. And then at the bottom, the green line, that's the regular charging. For that, we made use of Movares 2012-2013 study into charging behavior. So that's their profile. And then the dotted line to the low, that's a different shape. That's the smart charging, steered by solar in this case. And complementing nicely solar when it's available, not at all times. And a vehicle to grid will also see some positive values at some points. It supports the grid, so it's it's a sort of the electric car becomes a small power producer. And that has the effect of the smart charging reducing for the entire year the peak capacity with 6% in this scenario, for example. And that is something that, is a result that you can quantify. The figure is just one time series of 1 week, and it's perhaps in that week it was a little bit more, but now the results in our study, looking at the total cost savings of the different in the different scenarios of either the smart charging or the smart and vehicle to grid charging. So it's in red is the savings in electricity production, and in that's added with in yellow the savings in the grid investments, and we arrive at figures in purple at the total of 90 to 170 euro per EV per year. Yeah, just going a little bit more in detail into the effects of the different scenarios. That's interesting. We very clearly we saw that in scenarios with more EVs, the savings were larger for the production for the power production side by a factor of 5. So that's what you would expect: more EVs, more benefits. What was a little bit concerning or troubling is that with in our scenarios with less solar and wind in feed, the savings were larger, and that might be explained by the average price level being also changed in a scenario with more renewables, for example. And we found that our vehicle-to-grid algorithm led to some 20 to 45 total million euros per year, more savings. But we feel that there is more potential in that. So if we would have improved our algorithm, if you would have incorporated also short-term flexibility markets, the imbalance market, that would give that a higher figure, but we didn't quantify that. For the grid, the cost savings are less big, and it is logical if you understand that power production effects, the electricity, that's a commodity that's constantly being produced. If you operate that smartly, you're constantly saving money, whereas the grid is a one-time investment, and that the effect is there. It's just less big than the societal effects on the power system, the power production system. Basically, the conclusions were the same. We're in the same directions. And the overall conclusion of our study, we quantified the cost savings at the production side, 90 to 170 euros per year per EV. In the grid, it's 10 to 12 euros per year, so order of magnitude less. The total value of a smart charging, vehicle-to-grid smart charging, we quantified in the study at 100 to 200 euros per EV per year. Smart charging, 130 million per year, and then vehicle-to-grid, 200 million per year, or possibly higher if you include things that we did not quantify. We don't know yet. Other people have looked at that. The total, if you look at add it all up, the total costs of introducing the electric vehicles in our scenarios will lead to 100 to 300 euros of additional costs for the total power system per year per EV. But if you do it very smartly, vehicle-to-grid has the potential to completely cancel out these additional costs. That was what followed from our study. We have looked at social costs, so we did not look at transfers between, we did not look at taxes, all of these things. Is just the basic societal costs, and some things that we did not do in the study that we could do. You could look at short-term flexibility markets. That has already been done, I think, by others present here today. You could look at the European dimension. You could look at the scenarios for different years further in the future, because our top scenario is 1 million EVs. Perhaps it's interesting to look at 7. Our driving profiles, you could refine that. You could make that more realistic and see what's happening with that. Since the study, this has led us to also invest in better electricity market modeling. So short-term balancing markets, things we couldn't do a year ago when we did this study, we are now able to do. That's what I wanted to end my story with.